everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we are doing my August wrap up. In August I finished 6 books and they were actually kind of split down the middle of like the first 3 books of the month were 3 stars, the last 3 books of the month were 4 stars. And I did read one of my books from my TBR Clear Out Project bonus round, TBR, which was Kekai by Vaishnavi Patel. This was the TBR wheel pick for the month, so we'll get to that one in a little bit because I'll just talk about these in the order that I read them. So first up, the first book that I finished in August was Dark Moon Defender by Sharon Shin. This is book 3 in the 12 Houses series. This is set in a world where there is a king, but there are 12 noble houses, and at this point in time there is some unrest among the houses and potentially civil war, as there are some noble houses that are gaining power and influence in order to take control of the country for themselves. They are also teaming up with a fanatical religious cult to use that power and influence as well to gain more advantage. The fanatical religious cult, their whole thing is that they hate and hunt mystics, which are essentially anyone that uses magic, anyone that has magic. In this series, we have 6 main characters that are this little found family. Some of them are mystics, some of them are king's riders, which are these kind of elite warriors that serve the king. And in each book, we're following one of those 6 main characters, and we're following their romance against the backdrop of this building unrest and civil war and fanatical cults and all of this. So in this book, we are following the perspective of Justin, who is one of the king's riders. He is on a solo mission to kind of stake out and keep an eye on the kind of main convent associated with this religious cult. And while he is there, of course, he meets someone, falls in love, and it happens to create some problems for them. This book was probably my least favorite in this series so far for a number of reasons. One being, I don't particularly like Justin as a character. He's never been my favorite of the characters in this series, and in this one, because he's kind of staking out this convent on his own, at least in the first half of the book, we don't get a lot of the other 5 characters, and so it's just sort of following him, and honestly he's not that interesting a character, so I didn't feel like he could really support the story as a solo character. But also, I did not like the romance in this one. I didn't like their tropes, their dynamic, and like Justin in this romance, it made me like him less. It made me truly dislike him. Going into the book, I was just a little like neutral but disinterested, and by the end of the book I'm like, I dislike his character, which is not really the way you want to end a book, is being like, oh no, I dislike the main character even more now. I can't go into too much detail about what I didn't like because it would be spoilers, but overall their dynamic in this was too much like, you know, like big strong muscle man protects tiny fragile woman, and it just felt very different from the romances that had been in the previous 2 books and what I had liked so much about those, because although, you know, the women in those 2 books had distinct personalities, they were both very competent people who could take care of themselves, and that was something that the men who they were in relationships with liked about them. In this one, the girl comes from a family that is extremely protective and controlling, and she has really been raised to be deferential to the men in her life, and then that same dynamic is just reproduced in her relationship with Justin, because he is also protective and controlling and just bulldozes her boundaries. And that was one of the things that I found particularly frustrating and honestly just like infuriating was that Justin would continually just ignore or bulldoze over her boundaries that she set, or what she wanted or what she said she needed, and he would just be like, well, I can't do that because I am in love with you and so I can't control myself, even in times where it actually put her more in danger. And then when she would be justifiably angry with him for not doing what she had asked him to do or for not respecting her boundaries, he would then get mad at her for being mad at him, and then it would turn into her being like, you know what, you're right, you were correct for not respecting my boundaries and I was throwing a tantrum. And what was frustrating about it is that it was clearly being framed by the author as like romanticizing, and that yeah, he was in the right for, you know, ignoring her boundaries, and like he just couldn't control himself, and it was a show of how much he cares. And that was infuriating. If he had been kind of put in his place about his bad behavior and he had like maybe learned something, then that would have been more okay. But the fact that it was framed in a positive way and was romanticized just drove me crazy, and I just was so upset about it, and it made me hate Justin as a character. Also, the girl that he is in a relationship with, like, she does have her own magical powers. There are things that she can do, but I found her to be still a very incompetent person, because she was one of those characters that I hate, which is like the ones who they have no real capability and are pretty useless, and so the one quality that the author gives them to show that they are a strong female character is idiotic stubbornness that makes no sense, only gets them into trouble, only creates problems, only puts people in danger. And it's like, well, she's a strong personality because she's so stubborn. It's like, no, she is stupid and incompetent. And I don't like either of them, and this book was so frustrating. I still gave this 3 stars, and I kind of have gone back and forth about like, should I give it a lower rating, because clearly I disliked the main character and the main romance so much. But there were still parts of this that I like. I mean, I like Sharon Chin's writing. It's so readable. I like this world. There are things we get to learn and kind of progresses the plot and what we know about this religious cult. We do get some POV chapters from some of the other characters, and the 6 of them do get together at one point in the story, so we get to see all of them together. So there were like moments that I really enjoyed. So I don't know. I gave it 3 stars because there were some like redeeming elements that sort of balance it out, but there were also a lot of things I did not like about this. I also continued my chronological reread of the Penric and Desdemona series by Lois McMaster-Bujold. I read 3 of the novellas. This is a bind-up of 3 novellas. I listened to them as audiobooks. So I listened to Penric and the Shaman, Penric's Fox, and Masquerade in Lodi. The first 2 I listened to at the beginning of the month, and both of those got 3 stars. They were fine, but not my favorite in the series. And then Masquerade in Lodi I listened to at the end of the month, and that was my favorite of the 3. I gave that one 4 stars. That one I just felt like had a more dynamic plot and was just more fun to listen to. In it, our main character Penric, who is this very like bookish, scholarly guy who happens to share his mind with a chaos demon that he has named Desdemona, which is sort of like having 10 old ladies in his head telling him what to do, but also she wants to just like do chaos magic all the time. The 2 of them get called in to help a city that there has been a man that washed up on shore, and they're not sure if he is sick or if he is maybe possessed by a demon that is causing his erratic behavior. So they go to check it out. Turns out he is possessed by a demon, but then he gets away and goes off into the city at the exact same time that there is a masquerade festival going on in the city, and so they end up like running around the city trying to find this poor guy who is possessed by a mad chaos demon. And so that one just was a more like dynamic story, and I enjoyed that one a lot, so I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Daughter of the Otherworld by Shauna Lawless. This is an arc that was very kindly sent to me by the author for an honest review, so thank you so much for sending it to me. And this is the first book in Era 2 of the Gale Song series. So last year I read the Gale Song trilogy and the companion novellas, and absolutely loved it. One of my favorite things I read last year, so I'm so excited about this new like Era 2 starting. The first book in this series, Daughter of the Otherworld, will be coming out this year. I think in the UK it comes out at the beginning of September, and in the US it's coming out in November. But this is Celtic historical fantasy. It takes place in 12th century Ireland, and we're following a mix of some familiar characters from the previous series, and we get some new characters. This takes place about like 150 years after the first trilogy, but many of the characters that we were following in the first trilogy are near immortal, and so we get to revisit some of those old characters, but we also get introduced to some new ones, which was very fun. I loved being back in this world, getting to catch up with some of those old characters, see where they are, how things have changed for them, also how things have changed in this world as history has progressed in that time. I really love Shauna Lawless's writing, and it just was so fun to be like back in this series. I do think that this first book feels like a lot of setup for the series, but that's also kind of what the first trilogy felt like for me. The first book in the series was a lot of setup and kind of maneuvering people into place, and then by the second book things really got going, and that's when I really got hooked. So this one, I'm very excited for the next book and really excited for this series because it is kind of setting things up, getting us caught up on the world and the people that we know, maneuvering people into place, and I'm really looking forward to where this is going to go. My one critique for this is that I felt like the romance moved too quickly. There was a romance that pretty early on I could tell like this was going to be the romance that was developing in this story, and I was interested in it. I was excited to see where it was going to go, but I did feel like this just sort of rushed through it a little bit too quickly, and the characters were like too far too fast emotionally. So that was my one issue with it, but I am still really looking forward to seeing where the series goes, and I gave this book 4 stars. And the last book that I have to talk about is Kekai by Vaishnavi Patel. This was my TBR wheel pick from my TBR Clear Out project. This is a retelling of the character Kekai from the Ramayana, which is an ancient Indian epic. And Kekai in this, we follow her from childhood through adulthood, through being married, having children, her children becoming adults. And she is somebody who wants a lot of freedom and agency in her life that she doesn't necessarily have as a woman at this time. And there are a lot of qualities that she has and interests that she has that consistently sort of put her in the world of men. And one of the things that I really liked about the way this was written was that I think her character, this type of character, could have very easily fallen into that not like other girls kind of trope, because so many of her interests and her qualities and her skills were, you know, kind of traditionally masculine things within this world. But instead of saying, oh, I'm not like other girls, Kekai took her own desire for greater control and agency in her own life and thought, other women might want this too. Other women deserve to have this kind of agency and protections and, you know, freedom in their own lives. And so she works to give women other opportunities. And I really loved that about her, that it did not fall into the not like other girls tropes. Even when she meets other women and at first thinks, oh, they hate me or they're gonna backstab me, the author makes it very clear that it is because Keikai is misinterpreting these other women, and she learns to make the strong connections and relationships with other women throughout the book. So that was probably my favorite thing about this. But overall, I thought this was really interesting. I know there's some conflicting opinions about this reinterpretation of the Ramayana because it is a religious text, and some people felt like this was not a good reimagining, or that it was looking at these myths kind of through a Western lens. And there are some people who really appreciated this reinterpretation, especially from the perspective of like a modern person reading these ancient stories and reinterpreting them for themselves, for a modern audience, and kind of grappling with like, what could this story mean? What could this story teach us in this modern time? So of course, I am not an expert on the Ramayana. I also am not Hindu, so I can't really speak to this, but I have read reviews from Own Voices reviewers, and I think that it is a very interesting discussion that it has sparked, and I can understand both sides of it. So I would encourage you to look up different reviews for this, but as a story, I really enjoyed this and I gave it 4 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in August. How was your August reading? What is your favorite thing that you read this month? Or have you read any of these books? I would love to know. But thank you all for watching, and until next time. Bye!